What's going on, guys? Chase here, and in today's video we have a lens review for you. Now, the lens we're going to be talking about is one of, in my personal opinion, the best do-it-all lenses, and it could be one of the best solo operator lenses that we have ever used. We've been using it for the last year for anything from camera car tracking shots. We've been using it locked off on a tripod, and we've even used it handheld, and it's worked great during that time. The lens we are talking about is, of course, the Canon Servo 18-80. Let's get into it. Now guys, before we get too deep into this video, I do got a request for you. We are still on that early YouTube channel status, so if you are enjoying this content, please make sure to hit that like button. You guys know by hitting that like button, you tell YouTube you like this content, so YouTube will push it out to more people. We're trying to grow, fam. So anybody that turns that like button blue, much appreciated for you. Now guys, before we get into this review, I gotta be clear. I am not one of those guys that is really into the tech specs of lenses or cameras for that matter. If you're looking for a video that's gonna be pixel peeping and doing all sorts of focus tests and stuff like that, that is not what we are going to do here. I am more of an experience-driven person, so my review is going to be based on the experience I have had with this lens. Now, we'll go over some of the specs of the camera, but only the ones that I really find that I care about. So if you're one of those tech spec guys, you might need to skip this video. Alright guys, so the 18-80 from Canon is part of their Cine E line, which is a pretty cool line of lenses. What it is this hybrid style lens that gives you the build quality and functionality that you would expect out of a cinema lens, but it also has a lot of features that you would be used to out of photo lenses as well. Now we're going to get into the pros and cons of this later on in the video. Alright, so let's talk about price for a second. This lens is going to set you back $4,600, and trust me, that is a lot of money until you start comparing it to other similar lenses in the market. So guys, when I was doing the research on what lens I should be looking into as our primary run and gun lens for camera car work, I knew I wanted to operate with as small of a team as I possibly could. So what that meant is I was looking for a lens that would allow autofocus so I didn't have to have a focus puller on every one of our shoots. So when I started scrolling through B&H to find these lenses that would give us the cinema quality out of the lens but give us the autofocus functionality of a photo lens, I quickly found this world of ENG style lenses, and previously I had never heard of that before, and boy did my mouth drop when I saw some of these prices. You guys can see now how $4,600 for a lens seems pretty cost effective. Now guys, as far as sensor sizes go, this lens is going to be created for cameras with Super 35 or APS-C size sensors, which means all any of you guys out there with cameras with full frame sensors are not really going to have as much use for this thing. I mean, you can get it, but what you're going to notice is vignetting on the edges of your frame when you have this thing zoomed all the way out at its like 18, something like that range. Actually, you know what? Let's throw this thing on my R5, and that way we can see exactly how much vignetting you're going to get. You guys hear that? So I guess the autofocus from the R5 does not work with this. Let's double check that. Seems like it's like it's trying to focus, but it can't. So I guess there's some communication thing. Let's look around. Let's go all the way to 18. Can you guys see the vignetting on the sides? To make this easy, I'm going to point it at the light. So that's all the vignetting you're gonna get. You guys can see the image stabilization. Don't worry, we'll talk about that later on. So obviously to get rid of that vignetting, you can zoom in, but let's see where exactly you have to zoom in for a full frame. At about 24, you get rid of the majority of the vignetting. And about 30, it's totally gone. I can still see some of that top right corner. Now obviously if you guys zoom in, like I said, if we zoom in here on this lens, do a little focus rack, you can get rid of the vignetting if you zoom in. What's the point of spending this kind of money on a lens and it's 18-80 and you can only use 35-80, right? Up to you though. Also, side note, how ridiculous does this thing look on a point and shoot R5? That's actually hilarious. All right, we're gonna leave that on because it's just funny to look at. Okay, so let's talk about some negatives that I have realized while having this thing for a little while. So first thing I got to mention on the negative side is how low the aperture can go. Now this can go down to a T4.4, which is not bad. You know, doing camera car work when we're trying to zoom in with a car, 4.4 gives us really good focus on the full vehicle and offers a pretty decent amount of background blur, enough to, you know, we can really separate the car from where it's moving through. But, you know, when we're in more of a low light situation or we want to get like a really blurry background, it would be nice to have a couple stops lower than 4.4. That being said, if you're close up to an object you guys saw a second ago, I'm about right here and I could zoom into 80 and, you know, focus on the back part of this 85mm lens, and we got some really good background blur. So it's capable of doing that. But I think if you guys are in a low light situation, you're gonna find yourself hindered with this. That being said, maybe we should do a low light test with the 18-80, like camera car night run or something like that. Future video, look for that. Now, the next up we gotta talk about is the servo noise that we've noticed. There's been a couple times we've been out shooting and we had like an onboard shotgun mic on our C200 there. And when the servo was being used for autofocus, so, you know, the focusing on something far away and then something tight, you can hear the focus motor. This is what it sounds like. Now, the first time we noticed this was actually here in the studio. We had a Deity S-Mic 2 on top of the C200. We were shooting a rebuild of a motorcycle and we could hear, and we were using that onboard microphone as one of our primary audio sources. So when we were editing, we noticed that noise and we started looking at the C200 and we're like, what was making that noise? And we found out it was the focusing motors here on the lens. So that's something you guys are gonna have to be careful of if you're using onboard microphones. If you have like a lapel on your subject or something like that, obviously this doesn't matter. This only matters for people that are using a microphone on top of the camera. Something you have to work around if you're gonna be focusing on something far away and then quickly, and that focus is gonna be working a lot. That's really when we could tell that noise. So an issue we've noticed specifically is how close the zoom and the iris gears are on this lens. So we use the Nucleus M Fizz units, and when attempting to rig this up to the camera, the lens gives us some major issues. Let's check it out. As you guys can see, these gears are literally next to each other. And with how big these motors are, there is no way to mount these next to each other. The workaround I use is mounting the motors on different sides of the lens. Another note on this lens gear is the size. Now, the focus gears are the industry standard 0.8, but for some reason the zoom and iris gears are the smaller 0.5. Now, this isn't a massive deal because all I had to do was when the Fizz unit came in, I ordered the 0.5 gears and just replaced them. But it would be nice if all the gears were the universal size, either 0.8 or 0.5. I just want consistency, honestly. Now, final thing to note on the negative side for this lens is if you go with the optional zoom rocker controller with a start and stop capability, you actually plug this directly into the lens with this little port. The problem is where they put the port on the actual lens. If you guys notice here on the servo motor on the lens, it says remote. You can unplug that, and this is where you plug this guy in. Also, I do have to note, there is a bracket here that we removed because obviously we're doing camera car work, we're not doing ENG style work. So you can mount this here if you want to. We just took it off. But now that we have this installed, you can't sit the lens down. I don't know why this is not poking out here or one other side. This doesn't really matter for us because, like I said, we don't use this remote that often, but for people that are using it, you basically, this is as low as the lens can ever get, so the cable has time and room to like curl around and stuff like that. I think it could have been in a little bit better of a spot, but it's okay. All right, so that's the negatives out of the way. Let's start talking about all the things I really like about this lens. All right, so one word, parfocal. And what that means is if you're locked on focus at something and you're at 18 millimeters on the lens, when you zoom into 80, it is going to remain focused on that thing. That makes this lens phenomenal for camera car work, because we're sitting here going down the road trying to track a vehicle. We can actually go from 18 to 80, zoom in on, let's just say a wheel or an emblem on the vehicle, and we can remain focused on that item. Now, I think to demonstrate this the best, let's show you guys what happens with this lens, and then let's replace it with a lens that's not parfocal. So yeah, pretty awesome, right? Next up, let's talk about the range of this lens. If I'm gonna spend almost $5 on a lens, the only way I can make that kind of number make sense is if I'm gonna get a ton of use out of that lens. Now, over the year we've been using this, I have found that the 18 to 80 focal range accounts for about 90% of the work we do here. So what I have found is I can basically leave this lens on my C200, and 90% of the time, I can do an entire shoot, whatever we're doing, with this lens without having to change it out. That's the only way I'm able to justify spending that kind of money on a lens. And now for the crowning achievement, for what I feel like makes this lens really the best solo operator lens, is the fact that you not only get the build quality and the image quality you get out of a cinema lens, but you also get all of the creature comforts you come to expect out of photo lenses, like image stabilization and autofocus. I'm sure a lot of you guys are like me, and you might be in that middle area between you've got a lot of photo lenses. Our collection of photo lenses here is pretty big. We cover a wide gamut, but we're getting into that point where we need cinema glass. But you're not ready to go to a fully manual cinema lens like this Canon 50mm. This is where this comes in clutch. All right, so first off, stabilization. The lens does have stabilization built into it, has 3 different modes, A, B, and C. A is more for handheld use, B is for slightly more aggressive shaking that you would maybe find inside of a car or something like that, and then mode C is for tripod use. Now let's talk about autofocus, because yes, this is a cinema lens that has autofocus capabilities. Now, before we get into it, we do need to note that because it has autofocus, the front focal gear does not have a hard stop, so it can scroll to infinity. Now, most cinema lenses have hard stops, but supposedly you can't have hard stops and autofocus at the same time. But when you pair a lens like this that has good autofocus with a camera that has amazing autofocus like our C200, it works incredibly well. In all of the camera car shots we've done with this lens and our C200, we have never had a focusing issue, which for the majority of the time makes it so I don't have to pay for a focus puller and I can run a more efficient set. So this is a cheaper cinema lens, but aperture ring, hard stops, focus ring, hard stops, infinity, and beyond. All right, guys, so that brings us to the end of this review of the Canon 18 to 80 Cine Servo lens. You have to look at lenses as investments, because most of the time the lenses you buy are going to grossly outlive the camera bodies that you're putting them on. And I can happily say, over the last year of using this lens, I'm very happy with the investment I've made. And I feel like the amount of times we're able to grab this lens and shoot with it makes it well worth that cost. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. It is super helpful to let YouTube know to promote this type of content out to the YouTube crazy viral world we are living in. If you guys have any questions that I didn't cover in this video, make sure to let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to answer any of them that you guys have. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found it helpful. If you guys enjoyed this type of content, we got much more content coming your way, so make sure to subscribe. And if you're over on Instagram, make sure to follow me at Chase Bueker. I try to make weekly posts over there that kind of complement the content we're making here on the YouTube channel. I'll see you guys over there or on the next video next week. See you guys then. Later.